Hey, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Tom.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. So, for those of you who haven't heard of Chris Fox yet, he is a iPhone app developer as well as a best-selling self-published novelist and about to get involved in some writing some nonfiction as well. He lives in Mill Valley. I actually lived in Mill Valley for a couple of months, just north of San Francisco. And he's just a really cool guy. He's been on a couple other podcasts and highly acclaimed on kboards.com, which is one of the biggest forums for authors and especially indie authors. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So tell us kind of about your background, how you got started writing novels and writing iPhone apps as well.
Sure, they both kind of happened together. And I guess the story would start back in 2007 with the mortgage crash that I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with. At the time, I worked in mortgage for about 6 years. I was the executive vice president at a mortgage bank, a job I absolutely hated. And when I saw the crash coming, I knew it was time to get out. So I took the opportunity to move home to Northern California. Once I was here, I decided to have a Lester Burnham moment for those of us seen the movie American Beauty. And I took the job with the least amount of responsibility, which was working in customer service at a credit union. And to date, it is still my favorite job ever. If you called in and needed your checking account balance, I was the guy that answered the phone. And when I wasn't on the phone, I was writing. So in between phone calls, I cranked out the first few novels, and that's sort of how I honed my craft. But unfortunately, it kind of became a trap. So I loved the job, but $12 an hour does not go very far when you're used to making a six-figure income. And very quickly, I had burned through my savings and knew that I was going to need to find another great source of revenue. So in 2010, Apple came out with the first iPad, and that's when the light bulb came on in my head. I realized that pretty much everyone was going to have a tablet or a smartphone very, very quickly. And the people that were positioned to take advantage of that stood to make a lot of money. So I started teaching myself in my spare time app development, working on iPhone apps at first and then eventually iPad apps. And I transitioned from working in customer service at $35,000 a year into a six-figure engineering job. I still have one of those today and absolutely love it as a day job. I have a healthy amount of stock, so I'm very invested in the startup that I work for. But as much fun as that is, I realized that writing is my passion. And so the entire time on the side, I was cranking out novels. And when I finally got to a point where I felt they were good enough, I decided to self-publish them. And I put out the first one in October of this year, and so far it's done really, really well.
Mhm. That's awesome. So you said you basically wrote your first novel on the job in between phone calls. I mean, how does that actually work? I mean, would your bosses upset with you? I mean, how did you get by that?
Oh, it was great. I was the top employee. So we had these things called cross sells, where when somebody called in, if we had a product or service that the credit union would benefit from, we were supposed to try to upsell the person when they called. And I was really, really, really good at that. So all of my numbers were the top in the department, and I really excelled. So as far as they were concerned, they just wanted to give me space to do my own thing. And so no one ever once said anything about the fact that I was constantly, we're writing in a Microsoft Word document in between phone calls.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay, but how did you do it from a productivity standpoint? I mean, because I know for me, if I get interrupted, during writing, it's really hard to get back into the flow. So, how did you stay productive when you're only working a few minutes here and there between phone calls?
I read a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, and it taught me to sort of structure my day. And so what I learned is I could set up 2 or 3 minute sprints in between phone calls where the goal was, okay, crank out 100 words. So I would write 3 paragraphs. And the skill that taught me as a writer is you don't necessarily need to go back and agonize over every word and every sentence. Just get it down, accept that your first draft is going to be terrible, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And when you don't have a choice, when there's a buzzer that's going to go off every 3 minutes and you're going to pick up a new phone call, all you really can do is just write and not worry about editing. And that has really served me well in the years since then.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I love about getting things done and just kind of like the productivity philosophy is that, the smaller period of time you set for yourself to get something done, the more productive you're going to be because you're not, like you said, you're not worried about editing or typos or, anything extraneous to the point, which is how do I get the first draft down on paper, disappears when you have a very short, time constraint that, you've got to get it done in the next couple minutes, otherwise you don't get it done at all.
Right. You've got that deadline hanging over your head, and so you push to hit that deadline. And as long as you're focused on that and not agonizing over the details, you can be really productive.
Hmm, that's awesome. Great. So, okay, so tell us more about kind of your writing process, because I know you write both apps as well as novels. Is there a lot of crossover between the two, or lessons you've learned from one that really apply to the other?
There are, and a lot of people look at me funny when I tell them this, but writing a novel is almost identical to writing software. So, for those that don't write fiction, there are two schools of thought. One group of people call themselves pantsers because they write by the seat of their pants, and the other group are plotters. They'll take the time to write out an outline. I learned the hard way that if you try and sit down and just code, you're going to create a messy application that is not going to do what you want it to do. You need a plan. And so I adopted the same methodology of having this overarching architecture for stories that I use for software. And so I start with the end of the novel. I know what that's going to be. I plot backwards to the beginning, and then I write forwards to make sure it all kind of flows together. It's the same way that I write software.
That's awesome. So, what do you mean when you say you start from the end?
So I'll get an idea of what I think would be a really cool scene. So, think about some of the great movies that you've seen in your life, like Star Wars with the Death Star blowing up. And once I have that idea in mind of, wow, wouldn't it be cool if, I'll then start asking myself questions, well, how could that situation arise? And the more questions you ask, the easier it is for you to plot backwards to create the characters and situations that are involved in leading up to that moment.
hmm Gotcha. Gotcha. So how much time do you spend on plotting, and is there kind of a methodology you have for it, or certain things you do or you avoid doing when you're plotting your novels?
I don't spend as much time as I used to. So in the beginning, I would spend hour upon hour just writing out plots and notes. Now I'll be jotting down notes. Sometimes when I wake up in the morning. Sometimes if I'm standing in line at the grocery store, I'll be jotting it down on my smartphone. And then probably twice a week, I'll sit down and compile all those notes. And whenever I'm ready to start a new project, I'll take all the notes that I've been working on for an upcoming novel and then hammer out a cohesive outline based on what I've put together.
Gotcha. So you spend maybe a couple weeks or months putting together different notes, like just as the ideas come to you, and then once you got your ideas down over however long it takes you, then you actually sit down for a day or half a day and put it all together and get your outline done, and then you're ready to write.
Exactly, and the system is something that I'm really refining. So the first novel took me about 2 years to write. I just finished up a draft of another novel called Project Solaris. It's a Silicon Valley sci-fi thriller, and I wrote the first manuscript for that in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Wow, that's awesome. And
Yeah,
so does that involve the plotting as well, or just the actual writing part?
that was just the writing part. So the plotting, I'm always working on two projects at once. So one of them I'm doing the actual writing for, and the other one that I'm plotting. And so I had been building the outline on the side, but I probably only put 4 or 5 hours into building the outline. I did spend a fair amount of time looking at research material for it. So I watched TV shows like Heroes, factored very heavily into the plot of the book, and so I use those for inspiration.
Gotcha. Okay, so how do you write a novel in 2 weeks? I mean, I know you still got a full-time job as well, right?
Right, and it comes down to time management, which is the single best skill anyone can have, I think. And which is why it sounds like you're an advocate of getting things done as well. Why I recommend it to everyone. So what I do, I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I go to the gym for an hour. And while I'm at the gym, I'm thinking about what I'm going to write that day. And each day's writing goal is 5,000 words if they're new words, or 10,000 words if I'm going to be editing something I've already written. And then when I get home, I crank out 5,000 words, and I only allow myself an hour to do this. So I had to get really, really fast. I use a program called Freedom that turns off the internet so I have no distractions. And I just sit down and I write. So it's just like what I used to do when I worked at the credit union, except instead of being interrupted every 3 minutes, I keep writing with no breaks.
hmm That's awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of authors I've talked to, they wouldn't believe, like, literally, Chris, you wrote a novel in 2 weeks. It's not possible. Like, how did you do that? Um, but it really is amazing. And you're talking about the first draft, right? I mean, you're not talking about, like, from writing it to all the way as being published, right?
Oh, there'll be a lot more involved. I'm already almost done with the second draft of it, and it'll probably have 4 or 5 drafts before it's done. So the first draft was terrible, but I got it down. And it's a short novel. It was only about 70,000 words, which is roughly 300 pages. But still, I was able to do it at 5,000 words a day in 2 weeks. And it's the first time I've been able to sustain that kind of productivity.
Yeah,
But
that's
I very
awesome.
much believe that writing is like a muscle. So the more that you do it, the faster you get. I mean, I couldn't have done this 2 years ago, or already longer than that. But the more I write, and the more I focus on this, the faster I get.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, when you're starting out, you you want to write the best novel ever, your best book ever, and you want to do your best work, and you want to get it done fast. But when you're starting to learn something, it's totally different than when you've done it. Once you've written 5, 10 books, it's really easy to write another book. That first book tends to be the hardest and the most difficult. Like you said, it took you over 2 years, and now you're down to 2 weeks for this one. So that's a big difference.
Right. For those that know about Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, the whole 10,000 hour rule, I think is very true. You're going to have to put in a ton of deliberate practice to master your craft. But once you've mastered your craft, all of a sudden it feels effortless. You can get into that flow where you can really produce.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, so how do you market your novels then? So, I know you self-publish, but what are you doing to promote? Because I know you had quite a bit of sales success as well with your novels.
Yeah, this part is, I think, easier than most people would assume. Really, all you need to do is figure out who your target audience is, and then look at how you would get their product in front of them. So there's some very easy ways on the web to do that. AdWords, Google AdWords, is an excellent source of revenue. All you have to do is get a list of keywords that are applicable to your book. So my first novel is called No Such Thing as Werewolves. I have a bunch of keywords like best werewolf novel, and there's probably 2 or 3 dozen terms like that I'm registered for and will bid on. And so if anybody searches on the internet to find those on Google, then I'm usually going to be the first hit. In addition to that, Amazon is the world's second largest search engine. So you get 7 keywords on Amazon.com whenever you put up any sort of product, and I maximize those in the same way that I did AdWords. So when somebody is searching for my book, if they type in werewolf horror novel, I'm going to be on that first page. And once they get there, I'm using passive marketing to sort of draw them in. And when I say passive marketing, I mean things like the cover. So probably 85% of the people that see my cover, they're going to see that there's a werewolf next to a pyramid, and they're not going to be interested in that. But if they're part of the 15% that would be, then they're going to click on it, and they're going to see whether or not they're interested in that book, and that's how you sort of draw them in through marketing. So it's doing a series of small steps like that all in a row that make your product successful.
That's awesome. I know a lot of people have done really successful with Facebook advertising, but I've never heard an author say that they've used Google AdWords and had success with that. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? And are you actually making a profit from those campaigns?
I am. I'm not making a ton of money on it as of yet. I am making at least a profit. So I'm probably making about 150% profit on what I'm investing, and I'm putting in about $20 a day.
Wow.
And I learned about the process from another author friend. His name is Sever Brony, and he writes a young adult fantasy. His first book is called Arcane. And I saw what he was doing, and he was just, pulling in money hand over fist with Google AdWords, and he's taken it to the nth degree, where he has probably 600 or 700 keywords on his list that people can type in that'll find his book, including things like misspellings. So I took a look at what he was doing. I asked him a bunch of questions, and I set up my campaign about probably 2 months ago. And every day I spend a minute or two sort of tweaking it, looking at how the keywords are performing, adding a few new keywords, removing the ones that aren't performing. It's kind of like gardening. I mean, you have to spend a little bit of time every day to make sure that you're pruning things so that it works to a good effect.
That's awesome. So are you sending people direct to Amazon, to your books page on Amazon, or do you have a custom landing page on your website you send people to?
Initially, I was sending them to Amazon because I wanted as few clicks between them and the sale as possible. But then I realized as I go wide and get onto other platforms, that's not going to work. So sometime this month, I'm probably going to set it up to go to a landing page I have on my website. My books will go live on iTunes and Kobo in April. And so before that happens, I need to have that landing page in place.
That's really, really cool. That's awesome. I like I said, I never heard anyone doing that. And it totally makes sense to me, though, because I mean, the thing with Google AdWords is it's really tough if you're in a really competitive industry. But I'm guessing, competing for like best werewolf novel is not a very competitive search term. So I'm guessing that's why you're doing so well with them. And that's so anyone writing novels, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and I'd assume it would work just as well for nonfiction. So since I know we probably have more nonfiction listeners to your podcast, I'd give it a try there too.
Yeah, awesome. So okay, so share with us some other marketing tips or secrets that you've been using.
Probably the primary thing that I think people should focus on is identifying their target customer. So anybody who's worked in marketing in any industry will tell you that the first thing that you do is you build a profile. So you decide who the number one person who's likely to buy your product is. And in that case, I made somebody that I call my mythical Bob, which I've talked about elsewhere. And you sort of figure out what his or her habits would be. what TV shows they watch, what books they like to read, where they spend their time. And once you know the answers to those questions, you're going to know how to advertise. So my Bob, the guy that would read the type of books that I write, I figured out what forums he would spend time on, and then I went to those forums and I started advertising there. In some cases, if it was something I was very interested in myself, I would create an account there, put the books in the signature for my account so that whenever I posted, it would show my books. It became an active part of those communities. And what I found is when you interact with communities of people that are into the same topic that you write about, people will naturally find your work. You don't have to say anything. And when they do, they become fans very, very quickly.
Mm, that's awesome. Yeah, that's such a brilliant idea and such a brilliant concept. And it is. I mean, it's like the most basic. One thing I learned in marketing and business school at Indiana University was that find out who your ideal customer is, who is your audience. And I think it's probably one of the biggest ideas I learned in college and business school. And it's so true. I mean, it's so powerful. Like when you actually understand who is your target customer, who is the person that if you told them about your book, they would immediately say, "Oh my God, I love that! I have to read that. I have to tell all my friends about it." Like, who is the person that was going to get that excited to hear about your book? And then where do you go and find those people? And like you said, forums are just a great place to find people like that, and it's totally free. I mean, it doesn't cost anything to join a forum and start posting.
Right. You can do basically free marketing by getting into those forums, and hopefully it's something that you're passionate about yourself, since you're writing about whatever that topic is. So it's really no effort. You go in and you post on a forum that you enjoy, and you get sales as a result.
That's awesome. And so you also mentioned you advertise in some of these forums. So how does that work?
So what I did, I hired myself an author assistant, which is a girl. She's a grad student, and she also writes on the side. And I had her comb the internet and find anything that had to do with werewolves or zombies. So forums, podcasts, book review sites, anything we thought was relevant. And so she came back to me with a list of those, and then I had her look at many of those sources and see which one of them would allow you to purchase a banner ad. And a lot of them, because they're small sites, they don't have much in the way of advertising. So if you purchase a banner ad, you're the only thing to show there. And so I found those networks and I started tapping into them and listing ads on the sites I thought were relevant.
hmm Cool. And so have those ads performed well for you?
Absolutely. And I set up affiliate links so I know where my revenue is coming from. And in so doing, you can see how an ad is performing. So you'll know, okay, I got 27 clicks from this particular affiliate link that I set up for this site.
Okay, that's such a brilliant point, and I think a lot of authors might miss that nuance. So tell us about that. It's the Amazon Associates Affiliate Program, and tell us about how you set up those tracking links and how that works so that you actually know where your sales are coming from.
Sure. So when you set up an affiliate link, you get a small percentage of the sale. The idea from Amazon is if you're driving people to their site, they want to reward you for doing so. So you can use that as a way to track metrics in addition to making a little bit of money on the side. And when you set up an affiliate link, the process is pretty straightforward. You can just Google setting up an affiliate link for Amazon. And that has to land on some sort of target page somewhere. So usually that's going to be on your website. And that means that if anybody were to click on a product on your website, you're getting money and see that that click happens. Because when you get paid, you'll get paid X amount of money for each specific affiliate link. So I've created dozens of affiliate links that I attach to any different source where somebody could purchase my book. So if it's coming from one particular website, I'll know that that's the case.
That's awesome. So basically just to reiterate and make sure it's really clear for people listening, basically you log in your Amazon Associates account if you haven't already. You create a new custom link, custom affiliate link every time for every website that you would advertise on or every place you promote your book. And then you can log back in, see your reports, and see, oh, well, this link from Facebook got this many sales, this link from this website got that many sales. So you can actually track individually how many sales you got from every place that you were advertising and promoting your book at, which is really, really cool.
That
Yeah,
was
so
definitely more concise than I put it.
what was that?
That was definitely more concise than I put it.
Yeah. Well, I want to break things down so people can actually take action and implement this and don't get confused with all the details because it's not really that complicated. But if you've never used Amazon Associates program before, then you might not understand it. But that's a really awesome tip. And honestly, if more people did that, because I get emails all the time from authors. They spent $500 on this marketing package. They were advertising on this book promotion site, and they have 5 sales last month. And none of their marketing is working, and they're not testing it, they're not tracking it, so they don't even know why it's not working.
Right, that's a lesson I picked up in the software world. If you want to understand whether or not your product is successful and how or why it's successful, you need to know who is using it, why they're using it, what they like about it. So in software, that means we track whenever somebody clicks a button in my application. I've got an analytic that's firing so that I know 147 click the next button on this particular screen. And so you're really just extending that out into your writing as well. And you can track how many people go to your website, what things on your website they like, and most importantly, where they buy your book.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. It sounds to me it's a lot like growth hacking. Like you said, it's a lot like what startups are doing in Silicon Valley, to grow businesses from, zero to millions of dollars really, really fast, is they have to have really good data, really good analytics to tell them, okay, what is working, what's not working. Because if you keep wasting money on stuff that's not working, then you're going to go broke really fast.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, what else have you learned about marketing along the way?
What else that would be relevant to our listeners? I think that Toastmasters, this is going to come a little out of left field. If you see behind me all the ribbons on the wall there, each one of those comes from a speech that I won at a Toastmasters event. So one of the number one things that I would recommend is that listeners consider going to a single Toastmasters meeting and seeing if it's for you. And it's designed primarily for people that don't like public speaking, and are a little bit terrified of it. And so they'll sort of ease you into the whole process and teach you the ropes. And the reason why I think this would be an excellent move for anybody who wants to get involved in fiction or nonfiction is if you're eloquent enough to explain what your product is, it's much, much easier to sell.
Hmm. That's a great point. I think, writing is all about communication, and, there's a lot of different ways to communicate. And if all you can do is, if you can become a better speaker, it's going to help you become a better writer. It's because it's going to help you become a better thinker, which is really the basis of all writing and communication.
Agreed. And one of the things that they do in Toastmasters is extemporaneous speaking. So it's called table topics, and you don't know going in what it's going to be about. So they'll say, okay, today's topic is the last time you got a traffic ticket, go. And you'll have to get up and speak for 3 minutes about something on the fly. And the act of speaking off the cuff really teaches you to think differently. And that really, I think, trickles into your writing and then just everyday life as a result.
Hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, I know I've gotten to several Toastmasters meetings myself, and I definitely found them useful. So I'd recommend that. I think another reason I might recommend that for a lot of authors is because, well, first of all, speaking in front of a room can be a great way to sell books. I mean, especially if you're a nonfiction author, if you're an expert on a specific field, speaking at conferences, speaking at seminars, speaking at workshops can be a really great way to sell a lot of books.
Right, and it'll terrify a lot of people, the idea of going, but the good news is you can go to your first meeting. You don't have to say a word to anybody other than stand up and say, hi, my name is Chris. And you can see if it's for you, but it really has paid for itself in spades.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think another thing I noticed with a lot of people in Toastmasters, especially people who were like, it was like their first time speaking and they, were totally anxious and fearful and had a lot of fear around that, is that, by overcoming that fear, which, public speaking is like the number one fear that people have, which is, even higher than death. So people are more afraid of speaking in public than dying, a lot of people, which is crazy to me. But I mean, I can relate to that because I used to be terrified of speaking in public. But just overcoming that fear and the confidence that comes from that, I think is incredibly valuable. And especially, like you said, when it comes to like actually promoting your work and communicating with people about what you write about and why your books are important, that confidence can make a huge difference in actually getting people to buy from you because people want to buy from someone who believes in what they do. And even if you believe in what you do, if you don't have the confidence to communicate that, it's very hard to attract those customers, those readers.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Cool, man. So, okay, so you've had a lot of success as well, I know, with your iPhone apps, writing iPhone apps. How does that work? Like, bring us into that world and tell us what that's like right now.
Oh, sure. So this gives me an opportunity to talk about the startup that I work for, which I love. I took a job at a company called CellScope 2 years ago. So what they did is they invented a microscope that attaches to your iPhone, and that microscope can be used for a variety of purposes. So you can use it for ear exams, for imaging on skin or eyes. And so these devices enable you to turn your phone into a health device to track certain types of data. So we built our business model around that. So our typical use case is parents, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If your kid has an ear infection at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're not sure whether or not you need to take them down to the ER, you can use my application to record an exam of the eardrum and then push a button, and that'll be sent to a doctor. And a few minutes later, you'll get a response from that doctor that says they're fine. We advise watchful waiting, or maybe you need to get down to the ER and have a look taken at this because I think I see some inflammation. So you can get that peace of mind. And I think that in the next century, you're going to see all sorts of startups doing things like what we're doing. We're sort of transforming how healthcare works.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. I'm a big fan of Shark Tank, and I know Mark
Hmm.
Cuban is always talking about, like the future of technology is sensors and applications and devices that give us more information about what's going on in the world with our iPhone or iPad or whatever. So I think that's right in there with that world. And yeah, I mean that's amazing that that technology that exists. I'm lucky. My parents are both medical doctors, so if I ever had an ear infection growing up, I just like, Dad, can you look at this? Which is amazing, but most people just don't have that, and the stress and struggle that someone has to go through just to take their kid to the ER or whatever. And if one little app can save someone all that time and pain, that's huge. That's amazing.
It really is. It's just blowing me away what we're able to accomplish now. And then just on a more fun angle, I do apps on the side. So I have a personal application I'm completing. It should be in the App Store in the next few weeks called the Beat Shuffle. And it's designed to work with the Apple Watch that's coming out. And so what it does is it's a fitness app so that it'll play music while you're running on something like, let's say, the treadmill. And you'll put in a target heart rate, and it'll monitor your heart rate. And if your heart rate starts to fall, it'll speed up the tempo of the music. And if your heart rate gets too fast, then it'll slow down that tempo of the music to kind of keep you in that range. So this was amazingly simple to write given the APIs that Apple has created for us. So I didn't have to put a ton of work into doing so. I use it myself at the gym, and I can't wait to get it out there for other people to try.
That's awesome. Cool. So is this your first app you've written as your own and published as your own?
I've done quite a few. Most of them I unpublished at one point or another just because they weren't up to the professional level of quality that I liked, but I've made some money in the past. So if you remember those geeks in high school that would sit around a table and roll dice and play Dungeons and Dragons, I was one of those kids. And so the first app that I made was called Evil Dice, and when you rolled, it would make fun of you. So I recorded a bunch of voices. I had male and female friends in the application. So if you roll a 20, that's a good thing on a D20. And if you roll a 1, that's bad. And if you roll a 1, it would say something rude to you.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have a lot of fun with what you do, which I think, out of all the authors I've talked to and most successful authors, like they love what they do. It's not really like work if you enjoy it. And it's hard to get yourself excited about spending so much time writing, whether it's apps or novels or whatever, if you don't actually love what you do. And it sounds like you really love what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Find what you're passionate about. I mean, I know I have. If it's something that you're passionate about, then you're going to put in 12 to 14 hours every day anyway because you love what you're doing. It's no longer work. It's no longer, oh God, I have to get up and go to the office. It's, I can't wait to see what challenge I'm going to overcome today.
Absolutely. Yeah, okay, so one question I have, because I don't actually, I kind of write novels, I kind of dabble with them, but I mainly write nonfiction. So I kind of want to learn more about the world of werewolves and vampires and, this like fantasy world because it's a huge genre. It's absolutely incredibly successful. So, and you talked about kind of your mythical Bob, avatar, your ideal customer. So who are the people that read werewolf novels that absolutely love what you do? Bring us into that world.
Okay, yeah, it's a big surprise to me that it's a much wider audience than I would have expected, and I think that this is a result of TV shows like Supernatural and The Walking Dead. So I have people that are in their 70s, minimum of both, who love my fiction about zombies and werewolves, and it goes all the way down to age 14. So it's a much wider audience than I ever would have guessed going into this. But primarily, it's people who like to play video games. They're enjoying the TV shows that I mentioned and other similar ones, things like Stargate. So they're looking for a fictional equivalent of some of that stuff. And there are hundreds upon hundreds of werewolf or vampire books out there. It's a really saturated genre. So my take on it is considerably different. Most of those are supernatural. So when I say supernatural, they don't really explain why these things exist. There's werewolves because there are. What I did is I took a much more scientific approach to it. I worked things like anthropology and helioseismology into my plot so that there's a real reason why werewolves would be able to transform. And it's explained scientifically why silver would hurt them or why moonlight might enable them to change. And then, of course, I had to take it a step further because I'm always doing that as an overachiever. I love Egyptology, and I love the idea that there are ancient cultures that existed that we may know nothing about. And there's a lot of little clues scattered all over the world that something like that really existed. So, for example, if you look at the Sphinx, we don't really know how or when the Sphinx was built. If you go to a traditional Egyptology course, they're going to tell you it was built by a guy named Pharaoh Khafre about 5,000 years ago, but he didn't claim credit for it. And that's unusual because pharaohs love to claim credit. It also suffered what appear to be thousands of years of water erosion, which can only be caused from rainfall. And Egypt hasn't seen that kind of rainfall since the last ice age, which would have been about 6 or 7 thousand years before we say it was built. So I took little facts like that. I invented myself an ancient culture that I think could have existed that was highly advanced. And I worked that in with my werewolf. So my books are definitely a different take on the whole werewolf zombie genre.
Gotcha. So you have this whole like scientific and as well as a really historical element. It sounds like you've done a lot of research for it as well.
I have, and I love doing that stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so much fun. Now you got kind of got me wanting to read them because I love that ancient history stuff too. So and I love science. So that sounds pretty fun. You might just convert me, Chris.
That'd be awesome. I'll take a sale.
That's great, man. So I know you talked about forums and how you participate in forums. Can you give us a little bit more insight into actually how that works? Because I know this is one idea I've shared with others many times, and the biggest kind of objection I hear is that I don't have the time, or I don't know what to say, or they just don't know how to actually effectively use their time in a forum without being spammy or salesy. So how do you actually do that?
Well, the first thing I suggest is never ever mention your book. You shouldn't need to do that, and doing so is going to be seen as an invasion. If you show up and say, "Hey, buy my book," you're going to get downvoted or just yelled at, and no one's going to buy your book. Worst case scenario, they may show up and one-star your book just because they're annoyed that you're posting it there. So what you have to do is find some place that you'd spend your time anyway. I think most people in this day and age have one or more forums that they go to, even if that's something social like Facebook. In my case, I spend a lot of time on Reddit. That's Reddit for those not familiar with the site. And it's got subreddits for every topic you can possibly imagine, from lifting weights to werewolves. And so in this case, I went to the werewolf subreddit, and I just started reading the threads there. And a lot of them are about werewolves, which clearly I'm interested in. So I just started joining the discussion and posting. And eventually, somebody figured out that I was the author of a werewolf book, and they brought it up. And I ended up getting a bunch of sales as a result of it. But the time that I'm spending there, I'm spending it because I'm enjoying it. So yeah, hopefully maybe I'll get some sales down the road, but you can't really approach it with that mindset. It's got to be something you want to do because you think it's fun.
That's such a great point, and I think a lot of people talk about, how much time they spend on the internet and, wasting time browsing different websites. And essentially that's what you're doing. I mean, you're just browsing websites that you love, that you enjoy, and that are your community and that have your ideal readers in there. And so rather than wasting time watching some silly video that has really no impact on your life, you're actually spending time doing something that can potentially lead to a lot of sales and a lot of exposure for you. So I think that's awesome. And like you said before, like at work, with only a couple of minutes here and there to write your novels, this is the kind of thing you can do with 5 minutes here and there. You can go onto a forum, read a couple posts, write a quick comment, and go back to your daily life and have that kind of activity that's actually going to lead to sales.
Right. It's such a subtle shift in mindset. So most people, they tend to lurk. They'll read content, but they don't actually contribute. If you want to sell books, the best way for you to do that is to become a contributor. So instead of just reading posts, make posts. And not a post about your book, a post that other people in that forum will find value from.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing with marketing today, especially online, is that you have to add value. Like your stuff has to be interesting. It has to be fun or exciting or educational or whatever, so that people actually want to read it and want to share it. And like you said, you don't have to mention your books. You don't have to try to be salesy or spammy or promote. Because especially on forums, because you can just have all your books linked right in your signature. It's not overly promotional, but they're there when people want to buy them.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Chris, you shared a wealth of wisdom with us today. I really appreciate it, man. Some awesome tips on marketing and promotion. Before you go, tell us where people can find out more about you and the work that you're doing.
You can find me at chrisfoxwrites.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for the time, Tom. Have a good day.